Hi, Tanya, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. I want to thank you so much for accepting to participate in this interview with me today. It's such an important topic, and you have very valuable experience and insight that we're really looking forward to hear from. Thank you so much for joining.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great. Before we talk about mental health, I would like to know a bit about your story first. Who are you? If you could introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about you. Who is Tanya?
Of course. So I'm Tanya Marwaha. I'm currently 23 years old and I'm a lived experience mental health, disability, suicide prevention consultant and speaker. My journey started with my mental health as young as I can remember. Growing up, I don't remember much, but I always remember really struggling with not wanting to be here. And when you're a child, it's really hard to understand exactly what it is you're feeling. I was very blessed that I have a loving family. Both my parents are immigrants. They lost their parents at a very young age. I was always very privileged growing up. I was able to have a shelter over my head, living in the UK, food on the table, and education, which so many other girls at my age from my community don't have access to. I always struggled with feeling like I had everything, but there was still something that felt incomplete.
Mhm.
And I remember just always feeling these negative thoughts and thinking, I don't want to be here, but I can never say that out loud. I don't want to let my parents down. I don't want to let other people down. But also, coming from the South Asian community, reputation and status is really important. Coming across as you have everything together and you're successful, and education was really important for us growing up. Thankfully, I was very good with education, but I was always a very quiet young girl. That meant that no one really understood or saw that I was struggling. And then fast forward to when I was around 12 years old, that's when I really, really struggled with my mental health and I experienced my first suicide crisis. And I remember not actually knowing what I was doing and not knowing what I was feeling, but thinking my parents are going to be so disappointed in me, I can't tell them. The next day, I was in the classroom, back pretending to be normal. And I just remember looking at my peers and thinking, they have no idea what I'm experiencing. And I also have no idea what they're experiencing
Mm.
because it's just things we don't speak about. At the same time, I started to struggle with chronic pain and chronic fatigue. It wasn't just the mental health difficulties, it was manifesting into my physical body as well. And when you're a young person, no one really believes you. I went to the doctor so many times, they said that I was doing it for attention, I was just too sensitive. As a young girl, you're often told that it's hormones or it's periods or it's something you'll grow out of. I feel like I spent all of my years growing up trying to prove that I was struggling and trying to help people believe me, but no one believed me. When I was 14 years old, before I saw a doctor, to I tried to seek support from my community leader. So I tried different religious and traditional methods to support my mental well-being. When that didn't work, eventually when I was 15, I went to the doctors and I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. As many other young people, you're either put on antidepressants or you're given 6 sessions of counseling, which is, of course, not enough. Also, I could never find a mental health professional who looked like me or could understand the culture and the background that I came from. It always felt like I could never fully be myself in therapy or counseling because they didn't understand what it was like to be South Asian. They didn't understand what it was like to be a young female from that background. It always felt like I was having to hide bits of myself. When I was 18, I went to university. I went to LSE in London to study international relations and Mandarin. So I was going to be studying abroad in China. However, unfortunately, COVID happened. I was back home. My year abroad got cancelled, and I've really struggled with my mental health. And that's when I had my most recent suicide crisis. And I remember having a urgent mental health referral appointment the week after my crisis. And it was on the phone, and the medical professional just said to me that you seem like you're okay now. There's nothing we can do. If you feel like that again, go to your GP, call 111 or call 999. And for me, I was just thinking, I've spent all of these years of my life trying to ask for help, but no one's been able to give me the help. And how many other young people are there like me who are trying to cry out for help and still not getting what they need? That's why I started Championing Youth Minds, which started as an Instagram page, sharing and posting about youth mental health and techniques and strategies to support that. That then grew into the community of now 3,000 young people globally. I then started to work with charities and organizations, trying to help them see what it's like to be a young person experiencing mental health difficulties. And then I then went on to share my own story, talk about suicide prevention and get involved in all of those. And even now, today, of course, I still struggle with my mental health. I'm on antidepressants. That's what's helping me manage my mental health and all the other strategies. I really want people, I guess my mission is to, from lived experience, to make sure that no one else feels alone and that support is for everyone, not just for a one size fits all approach.
Well, thank you very much for this, for sharing your story with us. And obviously, you've been through a very tumultuous journey, yet you say it and you share it with so much grace and so much kindness towards yourself. That's really beautiful towards yourself and others. That's really nice. There's a few pieces that you mentioned that stood out to me. First one is how it all started for in your situation. You feel that it just has always been that way. There was not one point where you suddenly felt that, oh, you started to feel even sad and you had those depressing thoughts. From the get-go, you feel that you had this condition.
I think I always struggled with that, but I think what made it worse was there was instances of bereavement in my family at a young age. And I think those instances of bereavement are perhaps what exacerbated this
Okay.
and triggered it a lot. And I really struggled with kind of coping with that as well as coping with everything that I was thinking and feeling at the time.
And then you mentioned being alone, which I think is such a big, it's a big topic, loneliness in itself, especially in the UK, in Europe, and also in big cities, I would say. Why did you feel alone? Because you were surrounded by your classmates. Didn't you feel that you could trust them or your family member? What prevented you from speaking up at that time?
I think was a lot of pressure and expectations, a lot of them internal around
Mm,
feeling like I need to present myself as capable, responsible. And I think also growing up with the world of social media, you see so much online that
yeah.
you never really see the authenticity and the human side of things. I think we're all unfortunately really good at masking and pretending to only show the highlight reels of our life or only show a certain part of ourselves. I think perhaps that's why so many of us deal with that loneliness because we feel like we're only able to show 10% of who we are, and the rest of the 90% we have to keep to ourselves. And that is then it builds up, and you feel like I can't show up as myself, or you become afraid of what people will think of you.
Yeah.
There's almost too many versions of you, and only yourself gets to see that authentic version of yourself.
That's really interesting. I think that it's even a theme in psychology, all of the social mask that we carry and all of that. That's really interesting. Do you think that in general, not only in your case, but do you think that social media have made a mental health worse and well-being worse, especially for young women, let's say?
I think social media, it works in both ways. I think it's positive in mental health, but also negative. I think the main thing is, as a young person, not knowing how to use social media properly. I think when I was younger, maybe around between the ages of like 10 to 16, I think social media had a more negative impact on me because I was a young girl struggling with body dysmorphia, low self-esteem, and no one told me that looking at certain things or following certain people on social media would make me feel worse or could trigger my thoughts and trigger my feelings. So I didn't feel empowered or confident in how to use social media for myself in a positive way. But I've noticed as I've gotten older, especially from like 18 to now, I have the awareness around how I can control what I see on social media and remembering that I have the power to influence how I consume and what I consume. I think there's positives and negatives, but I think what is really missing at the moment is authentic education for young people from a young age around how to use social media to support them. Everyone says we shouldn't use social media, but we live in a digital world. There is no way we can't use social media. My awareness and campaigning and advocacy has only happened because of social media. So
Thanks to social
um,
media, in that case, we can even say. Mm.
exactly. It's only possible if we give the tools and the education for young people with it.
That's really interesting. And also the beautiful thing is that now we have an algorithm that is very addictive. That's not great, but it's really personalized. Actually, we can choose to see maybe profiles that share some similar values to ours, that are also body positive, that are more inclusive, so we can choose what we see. So that actually that could be helpful as well. And while I agree with you, I don't think we can completely get rid of it, but we can have some digital detox and have some moments
Mhm.
where we can just log off, because being there 24/7 is, in from what I believe personally, it's harmful to just be all day in, day out on social media. All right. Now there is another part of your journey that you mentioned that was really interesting, was when you were seeking out for a therapist, and there was none that looked like you, that was South Asian. Do you think that for therapy to work, the person has to be similar to you? Maybe, for example, if you're a woman, you have to be with a woman, or if you're South Asian, you have to be with South Asian, or there need to be like some around the same age, or do you really believe that this is how therapy would work best?
I think more than similar lived experience is more important that the therapists have the cultural competency education around different lived experiences. That's particularly my advocacy work that I feel very passionately about, is making sure that all medical professionals, especially therapists, are culturally trained in the different experiences. And even if they don't have the same lived experience, or this is their first time listening to that lived experience, that they have the tools and the empathy and the awareness to navigate that. And I think for me, my best therapy experience was with another South Asian female, but that doesn't mean that they only have to be similar to me. They could be completely different to me in terms of lived experience, but if they had that awareness and that knowledge, that would make all the difference. One thing I'm really campaigning for is ensuring that there's mandatory cultural competency training for all medical professionals from any level, because that is really the thing that influences someone's
Life,
getting.
of course. How, yes, absolutely. That's really interesting what you said, and the two words you mentioned, empathy and cultural competency, which is what I
Mhm.
believe also are two really key components. Because personally, I don't believe that we could find someone that is exactly like us and have the same life story. And it's like, oh, here's my clone, amazing. I think that's a bit unlikely. But if there is some part, like you say, if she's South Asian as well, or woman as well, obviously it makes it easier, but I don't think you could find someone that would be 100% similar to you. But empathy and that cultural competence is crucial, and not everybody has it. And I think that especially in multicultural society like we have in the UK, it's important to have those tools if you want to be able to really help people, because sometimes it can damage more than it can help. If someone comes for help and they give you advice, but it's not actionable in that cultural context, it's a bit complicated. That's a really interesting point. Now, you try to take your own life several times, from what I understood. When you did that for the first time, what was your fault? Was there like a triggering event? What was your thought process behind that? If you feel comfortable sharing it with us, if not, it's absolutely fine. I respect that.
I think mainly just the thought of not wanting to be here. And I guess a lot of people say it's a lot about ending the pain that you're going through. And I think that's probably what I would say. It's almost feeling like there's no other option but that.
Mm.
And obviously, and now I know that even though I still feel that pain at times, that there are other options and there are other support that I can have. But I think at the moment that was probably feeling like you're at the end of a tunnel and there is no light. And that's the only way that you can escape these thoughts and feelings and the experience that you're having.
There is an increasing number of people who try to take their own life. Some of them, unfortunately, manage to do it, which it's really sad. And I send, like, I hope their family gets can survive this difficult period. But according to you, why is it increasing? Why more people are trying to take that action? Is there why? I think that's one of the main questions that everyone would be wondering, like, why do we see this increasing number of people trying to take their own life?
I think statistically, we've been seeing an increase in mental illness, mental health challenges, mental health referrals, especially within the UK. I think the biggest reason at the moment is that the waiting times and access to support and treatment is just so poor at the moment within the UK. People are waiting up until from like 12 months to 24 months just to get support from their medical professionals. And even then, it may not even be the right support that they need. I think it's the fact that there is no safety net or support for individuals who are in crisis mode. They kind of just have to, they're just expected to carry on with life as it is, which is obviously impossible. And I think sometimes that can exacerbate someone's feelings of
Yeah.
desperateness and hopelessness as well, where the place that they can get the support and the place that should be giving the support isn't giving that to them. I think what we're really seeing at the moment is the lack of funding and the lack of resources and the lack of true urgency and importance given to the mental health crisis at the moment within the UK.
Mm.
And the more that we have people on waiting lists for years, the more that we are dismissive of how many people we truly have in crisis point, unfortunately, increase or stagnate, and they have been doing for the last decade as well. That's why it's so important to take this seriously because statistically, it might look like a number on paper, but behind that is a life, that is a
The
person
life.
behind that. And the statistics show that each suicide affects 135 other people. Those who have lost someone to suicide are 8 times more at risk of taking their own life. 5 other people who are then at increased risk of suicide, you can just see the ripple effect of that. It's not just even about prevention, it's not just even about supporting someone in crisis point, it's also how do you support those who have been impacted by it. It does really impact everyone in society. There's so much to it.
It confirms that it's a pandemic.
Exactly.
It just confirms that. That's really intense. But I also had to look at some of the figures, and I saw that in those attempts there were a majority of males. Why
Mm.
do you think that is?
I think statistics show that there's a higher number of women who attempt suicide, but there is a higher number of males who die by. I'm not the expert in it, but I do think it's something to do with the methods used for suicide, which is why they differ. But I think we're doing a really great job at raising awareness. And sometimes we forget that the statistics are higher for females who actually attempt. And I think there's still a lot more research and data and conclusions that need to be drawn out as to exactly why that is and what we can do to adapt services and support for that. What we also see now is that the biggest killer for under 35s in the UK is suicide. More than road traffic accidents, more than cancer, more than anything. I think is really important as well is that statistics can show us different groups that are impacted, different age groups. But actually, if you take a step back,
As a
suicide impacts everyone and everything.
I know it seems like it's today's word, but it's a big why because my main question when I hear what you say is what society have we created that people want to take their own life? And at scale, it seems to be at scale across demographics. I'm just thinking because to me, it's not just about having access to psychology, which is incredibly important. I think that I want to know why are people feeling that way in the first place? What type of society have we created? And do you think that there's some factors that are due maybe to our lifestyle that could contribute to those feelings of isolation, of depression, and all of those mental health issues that come with it later on? So, depression and so on.
I think the biggest elephant in the room is the world we're living in right now, the geopolitical climate. There is just so much going on in the world right now. And of course, there's always been so much going on in the world right now. But I think the world we live in right now, we can't escape incoming information. We are constantly bombarded with information that's happening around the world. We can't ignore the genocides and the conflicts that are going on in the world right now, especially for young people, economic instability, the worries about actual survival, what's the world going to look like? Climate change and eco anxiety is so real, especially for the younger generations, not actually knowing what the
Yeah.
world is going to look like that they're going to live in. Job insecurity. I think there is just so much going on in the world right now. And I think we've become quite desensitized in a way because we see these notifications pop up on our phone
Yeah.
of things happening, lives being lost, and we're like, this is so common, this happens all the time. But for different people, it impacts them in different ways. I think A really big thing for me, I think, is the world we live in right now. And when we see what leadership looks like across the world, I think a lot of people are losing hope. They're losing hope in a world which is human, a world which is made up of empathy and compassion and value for human life. I think we're living in a world which is too driven by power, ego, and pride.
I think what you said is really interesting because we even see it in the fact that some people don't want to have children. And it says a
Mhm.
lot. It says that we don't want to perpetuate our species because of what we're seeing right now. And when we look at those previous generation, they always had this, how do you call it? Like it's as if you had you had for granted that the next generation would have it better. There was this notion of progress. And it feels like for this generation, there's no notion of progress. Actually, there's regression. For example, if
Exactly.
we look at our grandparents or and stuff like that, they would be like, we'll have like technological advancement, our life will get better and all of that. And now it's no, it's getting worse. We're talking about saving the earth. We're not even there's war, there's genocides, there's so many things happening. And on top of that, there's just earth. I think like the fact that earth is concerned, it's such a major issue. It means that even the place that we all live in, we're not sure that we'll be there anymore. And it just creates so much violence, pain, as you said, and uncertainty that obviously it makes sense that some people cannot see the future. To even
Mhm.
be positive about the future and looking for it, you need to be able to see it. And I feel that's for a lot of people in this generation, they cannot see it. Even also the economic aspect of things, where if you look at previous generation, they were going to uni, they knew they would have a job, they knew they would be able to buy a house. Buying a house in the UK, I do not say it's impossible because some people do it, but they would be doing it way later in life compared to previous generation if they ever do. And I'm talking mostly about big cities like London and stuff like that. When you look at all of these factors, it makes sense. I will never justify the situation, but I think it can give us element to it as to why
Mhm.
people are in such a mental state. According to you, what could we do? Because we talked a lot about the tough part, but what could we do to make it to make people feel healthier mentally?
I think a lot of what people are trying to do at the moment is introduce more technology, apps, solutions to solve the mental health crisis. I think obviously, as we said, funding and resourcing is so important, but that's something as normal members of society we can't do anything about. But I do truly believe we need to return to a society where we really value human connection, human emotions, in-person time, but also online time. I think actually we need to be able to disconnect slightly from all of the noise of social media, the noise of this career ladder, success, everything that we're hearing, and really just return to our human selves, thinking about compassion, emotions, empathy, all of these sorts of things. Because if we think about loneliness, how do we solve loneliness? It's through human connection, it's through feeling valued, it's through feeling that respect and appreciation. And it sounds so simple. And it's not to say that that's going to solve the problem for everyone, but it is a step closer to getting to where we need to get to. And I think in the world we live in right now, where everything's very divisive, there's so much going on, we feel like we are always just trying to get through the day and survive for the next day. I think actually being able to really ground ourselves in the fact that we are human, we're not meant to be machines.
Exactly.
We do have emotions, and just being able to allow ourselves to be human again, I think would make such a big difference.
I agree. That's a very beautiful ending note. One last question for you because you touched on loneliness and we talked also about culture. I was thinking that obviously the West is quite an individualistic society, whereas if you look at Asia, Africa, Latin America as well, they're more collectivist society, whereas there is an emphasis on the community.
Mm.
Since you're South Asian and British, you have these two, and I have as well. I am part of this, like we're third culture child. I think that's how it's called when you have like this different culture. Do you think that in Asia you would have less mental health? Not you personally, but you would encounter in general in the population, there would be less mental health issue since there is more importance on the community. If we look at that, maybe people should be feeling better mentally. What do you think?
I think that's an interesting point. I do a lot of mental health work in India, Singapore, and Asia as a region. And what have I always seen is that their biggest support system is the community. And when I meet people who are struggling with their mental health, it's usually that disconnect or no sense of belonging to a community, which has triggered a lot of how they're feeling. I genuinely think that there is so much we can learn from collectivist communities and societies in the West about when it comes to mental health. Because for them, it's not necessarily about the medical model and the medicalization of someone's experience. It's really about the human experience and
Yeah,
the holistic experience. I definitely agree, and I think that's why it's really important to think about what what context have we grown up in? What have we seen? What is being role modeled to us, and how can we lean on those different practices around the world? Because there's some amazing, amazing communities out there who are doing so much, and it's not to say that mental health challenges don't exist, but it's about how
no.
they navigate them and support each other.
Exactly, exactly. It's about our approach to it because when we see in Asia, it's I like the word that you use holistic. We see,
Mm,
it would be seeing the thing as a whole, whereas in the West, it's more, and I'm not here to say like West against East, it's not, it just provide like more perspective. It's more, for example, we wait until someone is sick and then, oh, what's the solution? What's the medication? Maybe
mm,
if we could prevent and create and have a more holistic lifestyle, then maybe we wouldn't get to that point where medication is needed. It's an interesting perspective to add. Thank you so much, Tanya. I really appreciate your participation. Is there one last word you would like to share with the audience?
I think the main thing I'd like to say is to you is thank you so much for choosing mental health as the thing to advocate for because what you're doing is setting an example and being a role model for so many others who can use their platform and use their voice and use their connections to really platform mental health and the crisis that we're experiencing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tanya.